Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our monthly series, Patio Perspectives. This is episode 6, Creating a Culture of Sustainability. I'm Paul Salinger, your host. I have a great guest today. Let me first start by just welcoming everybody and thanking our Patio Perspectives sponsor. This month, it's the California Academy of Sciences. And if you stick around until the end, we're going to have a little bit of a raffle. We have a giveaway today, a grab bag from the California Academy of Sciences with some fun items in it. So let's get started. I have a really great guest today, somebody that I've been wanting to talk to for a long time and have been following for a very long time. His name is Joel Makower. And for more than 30 years, through his writing, speaking, and leadership, Joel has helped companies align pressing environmental and social issues with business success. A former nationally syndicated columnist, Joel is author or co-author of more than a dozen books. And in 2014, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame of the International Society of Sustainability Professionals. The Associated Press has called him the guru of green business practices. Welcome to Patio Perspectives, Joel. It is such an honor to have you here today, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks so much, Paul. It's great to be here.
So I've been thinking a lot about how we become more climate literate in the event sector and how we create a culture of sustainability. This feels like what you've been doing for many years at GreenBiz. And I guess the question is, what is this moment that we're in right now, and what's most needed in this moment from a sustainability perspective?
Well, it's kind of an all hands on deck moment, to put it bluntly. I mean, we are losing ground on some of the most pressing social and environmental issues we face in our world, some of which are definitely considered existential, like the climate crisis and also the biodiversity crisis, but also social inequity and a number of other things. So the question is how does every business activity, events being one big part of that, align with what's needed and align with the goals and basically do their part. And so I mean, just so for context, GreenBiz Group, the company I co-founded, puts on, among other things, we put on 5 big events a year. So that's one part of what we do. It's a big part of what we do. And one of those is coming up a week from now, as you and I are speaking, in the third week of October, with about 5,000 people. So there's substantial events, and I think there's an opportunity for events large and small to play a role and to align operations and presentation and everything else with what society basically expects, and particularly business customers and attendees.
Have you seen in the business world, have you seen more of a move towards climate literacy and creating cultures of sustainability? And how does that play out?
Well, across business, sure, huge. I mean, this is one of the most interesting conversations. I've been tracking this for, well, you said over 30, it's now about 35 years. In this field, and having seen this from the late 1980s into today, I mean, this conversation has grown enormously and substantively. Not just more companies that are involved, but companies doing more and bigger things, sometimes bold and audacious things. And so, the expectations that businesses are going to not only do less bad, but actually do some good. And the whole, we've gone from sort of complying with the laws to doing well by doing good to now being net positive, which is how do companies and business in general leave the world in better shape than they found it. And there's lots of different ways to do that. This is a big and growing conversation.
Yeah, and I think even in the event world, we've seen a move towards net zero and net zero pledges, but I think there are some people starting to think about the idea of net positive as opposed to just net zero. And so are there any real examples that you have in terms of like companies or events doing bold and audacious things?
Well, we do a lot of that at our events. I mean, I'm not on the events team. We have a small but mighty team of about 5 or 6 badass people who really do some amazing work in terms of, and I can get into the weeds of that, what they do and how they do some of it. But it's interesting. Just like companies, there's some companies that are sort of at the beginning, the starting gate of their sustainability journey. Some are
Right.
doing some small, mostly symbolic kinds of things, recycling, kinds
Yeah.
of things, or banishing polystyrene foam cups from headquarters.
Right. Right.
And some are doing really rethinking their operations and their strategy and their business lines in a world
Mm-hmm.
where energy, water, carbon, toxics, and materials are in short supply, or will be a limited supply.
Yeah.
And the interesting question is, well, how do you, what are the business opportunities that fall out of that? And those are interesting conversations. So events are all over the map, and some don't do anything. Some do some basic recycling.
Right.
Many are still in the Stone Age, if you will.
Right.
An increasing number of them are doing a lot of things right.
Right. How do you see roles, and jobs changing within both business and the event sector, as we talk about creating cultures of sustainability and climate literacy, and sort of moving towards more sustainable practices? How are the roles and jobs changing, and what should people kind of think about in terms of new skill sets?
Well, it's changing, and because at one point, and still to some extent, sustainability was relegated to the sustainability department, or
Right.
somebody on in the company, or on the project or the event, who's in charge of all that. But increasingly, this is becoming so pervasive that it's now moving out into, so in companies, it's part of energy and real estate and facilities, supply chain, finance, marketing, human resources, and on and on. In an events, you think about, food service to logistics to managing the show floor to the program and stage and all that. It's not someone on high or off to the left side who's in charge of this. It's now everybody's responsibility. So this is all being, really fanning out into the various functions, and that's true at events just as it is in larger organizations.
Yeah, and I think that, as you said, we've seen in the past where, one person might get assigned to be the sustainability person for an event. And, I think what I've been thinking about and what we've talked about is that it is everybody's role. And if you're going to create a culture of sustainability, everybody has to take on kind of that value system and that lens to change the culture, so that sustainability is not just an add-on or a bolt-on to the program.
Yeah, yes, and you still need somebody quarterbacking it.
Yeah, sure.
The American football term. Somebody needs to still be, overseeing it and coordinating, making sure that things are being taken care of, and offering experience and insight and resources and things like that. So you need both.
Yeah. What does that person need to know? What kind of leadership skills does that person need to, quarterback, as you say, or to lead a team, and to start to get people to understand, why sustainability is so important, and what do other people need to know? How do they engage with other stakeholders?
Sure. Well, first of all, they need to understand the issues. They need to understand the state of the art in events, and it's evolving fairly quickly. There's a lot of things that you can do today that you couldn't do 2 or 3 or certainly 5 years ago. And then, it's a lot of this is just communications, cajoling, coordinating, soft influence. I mean, most sustainability professionals, have influence but no authority in their organizations.
Right.
And so they don't operate by command and control, saying you must do this. Although sometimes someone above them is mandating things, and the sustainability person is there to help facilitate, make sure those things happen.
Right.
But a lot of this is now by influence and partnerships and teaching and communications, and a lot of the softer skills that is, I think, a really important. It's not a coincidence. I'm going to make a generalization here, that the sustainability profession inside companies is now about 60% women, who tend, as a overstatement or generalization, to have better collaborative and communication skills than a lot of us dudes.
Yeah, yeah. Um, You and I have talked about technology playing a role in all of this, and I know that you wrote a column around AI and chatbots and whatnot. How do you see technology and AI kind of like either helping or hurting this whole sustainability conversation?
Well, technology in general doesn't necessarily, I mean, do things that we can't do. It helps us do things that we can do better, faster, cheaper, more effectively. And so technology is rarely just a thing you do without forethought or knowledge or planning or and any number of other things that we all need in business. So and technology is such a broad term. Are we talking about AI? Or are we talking about recycling technology, renewable energy technology, or mobility and vehicle technology, or just recycling technology and what's possible, food service? Those are all, those technology is pervasive. It's in everything we do. Right now, as you and I are talking on Zoom and using computers and microphones and cameras and everything else, there's about a dozen technologies that are being deployed that we're not even thinking about. And so, that's certainly true in spades in the rest of our lives. And I think, so it's really hard to talk about technology generally, but I think, it's playing a role, but, technology is like a hammer. It can be used to build things or to break things.
Just in terms of AI in particular, is there something that you're seeing where I know you've asked a bunch of questions to some of the various different chatbots, for example. What did you learn from that? Do you see AI as being of value for sustainability professionals?
Well, it's a value for humans in a lot of ways if it's used correctly. So it can synthesize things. You can dump a report in there, a 50-page PDF, and say summarize this, and it'll do it in a minute. Come up with the 5 or whatever number of key findings or bullet points. Those are amazing. And it also is known to with the technology technologists call hallucinate, which is to make things up. So just out of thin air. There's a court case where some rookie lawyer used AI to create a legal brief that they filed, and the judge asked questions about it. And it turns out that the court cases the AI presented and that were filed didn't exist. And it's pretty amazing that and a little scary that it can do that. So I think this, we are such early days. Think internet 1996. That we don't really know how all this is going to change, except that it will. We couldn't have predicted all the ways that the internet was going to change how we do business, let alone live our lives. And here we are. And I think AI is going to be very similar, if not more so. So it's really hard to make too many predictions about that because it's evolving. Chat GPT was introduced about 9 months ago, 10 months ago. It's barely, it's so new that it's really hard to know. It's version 1.0 or 2.0, and it's really early days. So there's a lot more to come.
Yeah, given the early days of AI and given the early stages of it, are there risks involved, especially right now, in terms of sustainability? People maybe overhyping it, overusing it in a way to where, I should point out, it sometimes gives you wrong answers or hallucinatory answers. And, should we be careful about it, becoming another greenwashing tool, for example, or becoming something where we make claims that aren't actually true?
Sure, we could. But it's no different in sustainability than it is in the rest of life. It's what was that old Soviet Union expression? Trust but verify. We can rely on this stuff, and it does a great job. But it's not perfect, and it can be misleading. So humans are still needed.
Yeah. So let's talk about events a little bit more. So, running your own events and being involved in events for a number of years, where do you think the event sector is at this particular moment? And what have you guys learned by running events from a sustainability perspective?
Well, I think the event industry is still early days in terms of sustainability, although it depends. I mean, if you go to events, as I said before, you'll see more recycling bins. You'll maybe see, water bottles instead of disposable cups. You'll see a number of things, but it's a little bit more for show. In other words, it's the things that the attendees see, and there's a lot that attendees don't see.
Right.
I mean, I could go through, there's a page and I could send it to you. I can actually, if I put it in chat, will others be able to see it?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. It's a page. We have these for all of our events. This one's for one of our flagship events that we have every February in Scottsdale, Arizona, called GreenBiz. We'll have about 2,500 corporate sustainability professionals attending. So it's a good size event. It's at a Marriott hotel. We take over the whole venue. And, you see there's from food donation to zero waste boxes, where for the hard to recycle things, we partner with a company called TerraCycle to divert things that, can't easily be recycled. We use liquid hand soap that's been in the bathrooms that's actually made from greenhouse gas. So we actually swap out the soap. We do tree planting that to offset whatever energy is used. And it's also very carefully curated. So it's a particular, in this particular case, planting trees that reforest part that was impacted in California by forest fires. You'll see the word partnering a lot. So we partner with One Tree Planted for that. We partner with Repurpose Global to remove 100 pounds of plastic, 100 nature-bound plastic pouches for every GreenBiz attendee. I'm not sure what that means, actually, but we're diverting plastic. We're working with Bonneville Environmental Foundation to offset the water use. We're, obviously zero waste. I think we're at something like 99.6 or some percent of waste diversion, offsetting the travel and other emissions resulting from carbon emissions resulting from producing the event. The food service, and there's some interesting things to talk about that. We work with the venues to create food service that aligns with our values. Very little meat, certainly no red meat, and sustainably, locally harvested whenever possible. And as I already said, the food waste. So it goes on, and as I said, the word partner works. It shows up a lot on that page, and a lot more that isn't really known. But some of these things like water use, I mean, it's not something that the attendees see. Right. Carbon offsetting is not something the attendees see. And so a lot of this is really, pretty well thought out and executed by our team. Amazing group in our team who do these things. And as I said, I'm not involved with this, but it's and all this stuff. We didn't start doing all of these things on day one. Right. We started doing some of these things years and years ago. We've been doing events for 15 or 17 years. I've lost track. And little by little, as we gain experience, as the technologies improve, as the business services improve, and it also depends. It's very venue specific and city specific. So this event is in Arizona. Okay. Recycling infrastructure is okay there. We did an event in Seattle where it's a lot more robust. Right. We did one in Boston. We do in Silicon Valley, New York, and all over the place. And it really depends on the venue, on the hotel staff, on the kitchen staff, on so many variables, on the willingness of the hotel management to let you even do some of these things, swap out the bathroom soap or other things. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah, let me ask a couple of follow-up questions then. So it's true that there's a lot of things that we do from a sustainability standpoint that attendees don't necessarily see or often even don't know about. Do you know whether your team is communicating to attendees about some of those things, about what they don't see? Are they talking about decarbonization and zero waste and water use and any of those things? And how are they doing that?
We do some. We used to do more. We do less now because, frankly, our audiences just expect that.
Hmm.
Um, but where there's something new and innovative, or we want
Hmm.
to really feature one of our partners, we'll bring them on stage. One of the
Okay.
things we do is because this also isn't something necessarily, well, some of it is, but a lot of it isn't stuff we just do for the attendees. We do it with the attendees, so they're very much a part of the process.
Right.
So, at the beginning of the event, we'll talk about the zero waste goal. And usually on the day 2 or 3 of a multi-day event, most of ours are, we'll bring someone from the waste company, Waste Management or Republic or whoever it is,
Hmm.
on stage to say, how we doing?
Yeah.
And it's never 100%.
Right.
There's always something of some cute stories or interesting stories, at least, about some of the problematic materials. So, and then we have this website, this web page that I put into chat. We have one of those for every event so that people can go, and we'll direct people to say, if you want to learn about
Right.
our sustainability initiatives, go to this page. Then you
Right.
can learn about them in depth. You can click through and to a lot of our partners and learn more about them.
Right.
And so, we don't beat people over the head with it, and in some
Right.
cases we don't really tell them much of anything unless they go to that page.
Right. And then in terms of the venues that you work with or the hotels or and this could apply to just business in general. One of the things that we've been talking about a little bit in the event sector is like, is it time to start rewarding venues and hotels and others that are actually have the infrastructure in place, are doing really good sustainability practices with business, as opposed to just randomly picking a hotel or a venue because of it's a cheaper cost, or it's an easy place to get to. I'm curious what you might think about that.
Well, I don't know what you mean by rewarding. I think, we reward them by giving them our business. I mean,
Well,
we won't do
exactly.
business with someone who will not meet our standards. And sometimes there's a little give and take, as there always is in business. If
Sure.
somebody says, well, we really can't do that, or that's not legal in our state,
Uh-huh.
or we would, our health department requires A, B, and C.
Uh-huh.
Obviously you have to bend, but they have to bend too. So, you know, how much should we all be rewarded for doing the right thing? I don't know. I think it just should be the right thing. I should just be the norm. So we
Yeah, of
reward
course.
them, as I said, by giving them our business, promoting what they're doing to some extent, and thanking them publicly at the events. But I don't know that they need, a ribbon or a trophy just because they're doing what we've asked them to do.
Yeah, no, and I was thinking more in terms of just rewarding business, because I think that's the main motivation for why we want people to be doing sustainability practices, that it actually leads to business for them. Um, you and I have chatted a little bit about, there's always, we do always like to tout the things that we're doing well, but there's always obviously opportunities of the things that we haven't done well that we can continuously improve on. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, and if you have some examples of areas where you felt like you missed the boat and maybe could make some changes down the road.
Well, there's always things we can do better, and we learn every event. We learn something new, and it's also helpful when we go back to some of the same venues. Two of our
Mhm.
or 3 of our 5 annual events are held at the same venue every year,
Mhm.
or at least we've switched Marriott's in Scottsdale, Arizona, but basically the same. And a couple of them float around the country, and so it's some challenges there. Um, I think we learned, for example, I'll talk about 2 different aspects. One is, um, there's always something that's not recyclable that we didn't anticipate. In one case, we learned that the only thing we couldn't recycle were sterno cans that go to heat the dishes, in the
Mhm.
buffet.
Mhm.
And it turned out that was problematic. And we actually went through a process with the kitchen, with the, I guess, kitchen or maintenance crew from that hotel to melt out the what was left, the residual, you know uh, naphthalene or whatever the substance is, so that the can was pure and we could recycle it. I mean, it took a little extra effort there. My story is, uh, there's a friend of mine it has a regular booth at one of our expos, and she just every year had these little chocolates, particularly a chocolate that I love, which is Alter Eco, actually based here in Oakland, dark 74% dark chocolate, and I just it's like crack to me. So I always stop by and see my friend and squirrel away a few more of those in my pocket. And one year I went there to say hi to her, and I said, "Where's the chocolate?" She says, "Well, your staff won't let me have them anymore." Why is that? Well, it turns out the wrapper around this chocolate is laminated. It's one side paper, one side foil, not recyclable. So my chocolates are gone. But the biggest learning thing was when we made a big shift to our food service, and we decided to go one event. This was at our Scottsdale, Arizona event, to go an all plant-based diet, and it was the wrong move. We went too far, too fast. There were just a lot of problems, including the fact that the kitchen staff didn't really know how to prepare it. You know, a lot of kitchen staffs in a lot of hotels are immigrants whose English is not the best, and communicating can sometimes be an issue. And they do the best they can, and sometimes it just doesn't work. But we didn't communicate it well with the audience either. The audience was like, it wasn't even good food, and the audience was like, well, wait a minute. We went all the way from chicken and fish to plant-based, protein, and we didn't communicate it well. It wasn't presented well. We actually, I think, did ourselves harm. What we were trying to do, obviously, is to show that you could have plant-based foods at scale in a hotel ballroom. And we failed that. And so we walked that back, and we realized what we should have done all along was, you go to a lot of buffets and they have beef or chicken or fish or something. And then at the end, there's a vegetarian alternative.
Right.
We flip that on its head now, which is we have the vegetarian or maybe plant-based things. And then there's chicken or fish for those who need, like me, I need animal protein. First, my body does. I mean, I can do without it, but it's not happy, my body. And so I need a little bit of animal protein. It's just the way I'm built, I guess. And I've certainly had plenty of plant-based meals, and they're good, but they're not satisfying, and I don't feel good afterwards. So we now, we may have set the movement back a step or two, but and then the other ingredient in there was the communication with the audience, and helping them understand and bringing them along on the journey and getting their feedback. And the feedback we got, because we do conference surveys like most events,
of course,
was they hated the food. And so we whiffed that one, and next time we did better, and we continue to do better whilst again bringing more of these foods into the diet.
And did you find that the attempt at an all plant-based diet menu actually ended up creating more food waste because people didn't like the food, and so they just didn't eat it?
Oh, I'm sure. It's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I'm fairly certain that there were a lot of leftovers there. I mean, there was I can't remember what it was supposed to be, like a chicken patty or something it was like a sponge. It was so inedible. It really was unpleasant to eat, even if you love plant-based food. The vegans there saying, "Thank you for doing this, but what were you thinking?" And so, there was probably more waste, and we had to deal with that, as we do with all food waste at all of our events. But I don't know that it was 2x. It was just probably a bump up.
Yeah. So let's come back out of the event space just for a minute, because in your 30 years of working with businesses, writing about green business, consulting on green business, you've obviously seen a lot of transition, a lot of hopefully improvement. What's some of the advice that you're giving companies right now in terms of like sustainability and net zero or net positive, and just the move towards decarbonization, all the topics that we care about in the event space, but they really apply to business in general.
Well, I think one of the big challenges now is that the time is over for incremental change, and the time is past to we collectively in the sustainability world spend a lot of time celebrating incremental change. It's all necessary, but it's all highly insufficient.
Right.
The flip side of that is that companies change incrementally, as do we all. We very rarely, certainly organizations and most humans, don't go from go 180 degrees. We do it little by little. We become comfortable. We gain experience, knowledge, comfort, and so that's the big challenge right now: is how do we have these big, hairy, audacious goals of net zero, or net positive, of truly addressing the great issues that we have in front of us, particularly the climate crisis, at the scale, scope, and speed that the science requires, and do it at the speed of business, which is generally not that fast. So that's the big, I think, challenge right now, and how you maneuver that and navigate this moment, because it's not just that we all need to do this to save ourselves. The world is expecting that. Customers, investors, neighbors, or employees are expecting companies to be doing these things, and those expectations grow every single year. So I guess you asked for advice. I'm not sure what the advice is in all of that, except that businesses, all of us, operate in systems. I mean, we're talking through a system of microphones and cameras and internet connectivity and our laptops. As a system, but a business is a system. A house is a system. A city, whatever scale, there are systems, and we tend change really at this point needs to happen systemically, and that's really hard. They need we tend to address these things more at the component level than at the system. So I guess the advice, and whether you're talking about an event or a company or an industry, is be bold, ask big questions, be curious. My favorite questions in the world of sustainability all begin with the same 4 words: what would it take?
Right.
And you can fill that in with anything from the personal to the planetary. What would it take for me to get a good job? To what would it take for my company to be seen as a leader? What would it take to get to zero waste or net zero carbon emissions? What would it take to solve the climate crisis at the planetary level? But everything starts there in terms of the scale, scope, and speed, the level of ambition, the vision you have of what's possible. And so what would it take to make an event net zero energy, zero waste, net zero water, and to do that in a way that actually enhances the experience that people have, or at least make them feel better about the event than they might otherwise have, because they are part of something that's really doing something substantive. And that's true at the company level. It's true at pretty much any level you want to look at.
Right. Yeah, and I agree, and I think that what you're talking about is a lot of, again, what I've been thinking about in terms of, like, I often get the question from people of, like, well, where do I start? And I think your what would it take question is almost a good way of telling people, you have to start from a strategic standpoint rather than just a tactical standpoint. And you have to start asking the right questions. Like, do you want your event to be zero waste? Do you want it to be carbon neutral? And then what would it take to actually get there? And so that you develop kind of a strategy around sustainability versus just like a checklist of ticking off certain tactical things.
But I think it's also, Paul, about what does success look like, and what's the feeling you want to create? In other words, what would it take to create a successful event that delighted attendees in terms of the sustainability, amenities, and performance, that engaged the venue and staff, or the catering or kitchen staff, and help them understand the possibilities,
Hmm.
and was beneficial to the community. Then from there you get into, well, it needs to be zero waste, it needs to be net zero water, it needs to be all the different components
Right.
that are incumbent therein, and whether you're talking about an event or a product or an industry and a company. And so I think I don't know, most people think about net zero or zero waste. They think about what would be a great green event,
Right. Right.
and how do we do this, by the way, that creates new opportunities for people, particularly those at the lower end of the economic ladder, and
Right.
engages and so hotel staff often are lower paid,
Hmm.
and they said often come from, many cases, immigrant families. And how do we make this accessible to them, where they say, oh, this is great, we really, we've been trying to figure this out, thank you for helping us get started and show the way. So there's so many opportunities that come out of
Hmm.
this. And if we think about it from the opportunity space, not from the, oh my God, this is another hassle I have to deal with, beyond,
Right.
all the logistics and everything
Right.
else that goes into an event.
Right. Right. So that sort of leads me to another question. We have a tendency, I think, when we're talking about sustainability, to look at it almost 100% from an environmental perspective. But you brought up, people from maybe kitchen staff or event staff that are paid. How should we be thinking about, and how are companies thinking about kind of this idea of environmental justice, social justice, and bringing the people aspect into it, so that sustainability becomes more than just environmental?
Sure. Well, I mean, it takes place both inside and outside the event. So inside the event, I mean, it's very rare that we have a panel of all white males.
Yeah.
In fact, it's almost against our internal rules. You have to be able to justify it in some way, and things
Right.
go wrong. Sometimes you create the world's most diverse panel, and then two of the panelists have to drop out at the last minute, and they say, well, my colleague, white males, are substituted in, and sometimes they're best laid plans and all of that. So you can
Right.
model what diversity in this case looks like. But diversity isn't just about gender or race. It's also about different cultures. It's about youth or elders, and
Right.
creating something like that. Um, uh, Bringing the social world into the event. A lot of events, some of ours, do land acknowledgements, and whatever you think about
Yeah.
that, some people think they're hokey, some people really are moved by them. It's
Yeah.
bringing the local native tribes on whose land this is taking place, and was probably stolen some centuries ago. That is acknowledging that, and giving them an opportunity to talk a little bit about, not that the stealing of the land, but about the land. What should we know about the land on
Hmm.
which we're sitting at this moment?
Hmm.
This is a historical and contextual. And then a lot of events, and we've done some of this. We do community projects. We sometimes leave something behind that we built, whether it's just the GreenBiz team, or whether it's the entire or some subset of the attendee team. So there's lots of extracurricular activities. We go on hikes, we go on field trips at these events. And some people do community events too, where we work, and it's not something that we just decide to do on our own. We're working with local nonprofits. Maybe we're installing solar on panels on low-income homes.
Hmm.
Maybe we're doing some other, fix-up projects. Maybe we're planting a community garden in an area that's been a sandy lot.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things that you can do, and it takes work. All this stuff takes work and effort
Yeah.
to find them, and to work with the local nonprofits, and to but this is what engages people and creates community. I mean, one quick side thing: we have our events, are range from 1,000 to 5,000 people,
Hmm.
and we it's one of our mantras is, how do we create community at scale? Because we
Right.
learned that the success of an event is, yes, certainly, do some significant part to the content, and
Yeah.
yes, the experience, the venue, the extracurricular things, the meals, all that. but it's ultimately the success of an event is around creating community.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can create community, then people want to come back the next year,
Mm-hmm.
if only for the community, obviously for the content as well, but they want to be there because their people are there, their tribe, their friends. And so, how do you do that at 1,000 or 5,000 person event?
Right.
We're finding ways to do that through some technology and some other things that we just do within the breakouts and other ways, even in a plenary session. So, creating this experiences and doing community work or doing creating a zero waste event is part of that community. It's saying, look what you're a part of. We did this together.
Right.
And people say, wow, that's really fun. Thank you for that. And I feel good about that. And I'm connected to all these people who did this with me.
Yeah. And are you finding that creating that community, especially because you guys are focused on green business in particular, that you can start to leverage that to create bigger collective actions,
Sure.
make bigger, have more ambitious goals around some of the things that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Not everybody wants to do everything and every big thing, but there's always a subset of people who and often a significant subset who want to play and who want to be involved. And yeah, all these things, whether it's the internal operations of the event production or the community building and the footprint that you leave in that community, the greater community, in the city or town or area where this takes place. Yeah, you've got to start somewhere. You start small, you build on success, you learn from that. You say, wow, that worked. What else can we do? And how do we do that bigger now?
Right.
And in some ways that goes back to your, how do you get started? I mean, some of it just start somewhere. Like there are, sustainability, social, environmental, all of that. There's so many aspects to it. And it's really hard. And you got to kind of start somewhere. The other thing is people say, well, what's the biggest barrier that you find? And I think they're hoping for an answer like cost or something.
Right.
The biggest barrier, in a word, change.
Yeah.
When it comes to change, we all love the noun and hate the verb, right? We love the idea of change, but actually change, we all know we need to, gain weight or floss our teeth or I'm not gaining weight, lose weight, sorry, or gain weight. We need to do a lot. We need to change, stop smoking or spend more time with our kids or whatever the change is. That's in a personal life, those obviously at work as well. But actually making those changes, even though we need to do it, is hard. And so, or in some cases, unpleasant. And so that's the barrier, is change, whether it's individual change or organizational change or systemic change. That's really where this stuff runs up against a lot of barriers.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that even on the policy level, right? I mean, we're having a hard time getting our legislators to make change, especially at the kind of scale that we're talking about. Are there particular things from a policy perspective that businesses or organizations or even event people could be thinking about in terms of promoting and advocating for sustainability and starting to make change within their organizations?
Well, I mean, every aspect of this, recycling infrastructure, which is still not very good in most places. Most places not called California or New York or Washington or a few other places are still struggling with that. And even within those states and places I mentioned, they still, we don't do that great of a job in recycling. We certainly could do better. Renewable energy access and cost and connectivity to the grid. I mean, these are all policy things, whether it's the State Public Utilities Commission or the county waste management division, or sometimes it's at the state level. So, this is where, even food service, I mentioned before, there may be health things or, in some jurisdictions, perverse incentives that make it actually easier to do the wrong thing and harder to do the right thing. So there's probably dozens of those, and I'm not a policy guy, but I can sort of think about a few of them. And it's an opportunity for event producers, maybe in tandem with venues, the hotels or conference centers, to make it known to local regulators or local policymakers that we wish that we need you to do this. You need to help us help you create a zero waste community,
Right.
or whatever the goal is. And so, often there are regulators who, politically may not be aligned with some of these things, but they start hearing from even just a few businesses.
Yeah.
They may change their tune pretty quickly and realize that this is politicians ultimately, like to see a parade and then want to get in front of it.
Right.
And
Right.
and so they're often very willing to do this, at least within, sometimes it's just the small stuff. The bigger stuff is much harder. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to partner in different ways. You mentioned partnership earlier in terms of working with various different partners for your event. And I'm curious if you think about partnerships, whether, partnerships and policy could be somewhat combined within the event space. So for example, could event people partner with packaging companies to start to change packaging and get rid of single-use plastic? Could they partner with renewable energy companies to start to drive more renewable energy into venues and hotels to move away from fossil fuels as energy? I mean, just are there some things that you think about in terms of partnerships that people aren't thinking about right now from an event perspective?
I mean, I don't know, most events aren't that big. You have an event with a few hundred people or even a few thousand.
Right.
It's, you're not doing things at a scale that a packaging company or recycling folks are necessarily going to change things. But every voice counts and every little
Right.
thing helps, and and expressing oneself. But the partnership side thinking of is just that this is not a solo sport. This is a team sport, and you have to build the team. And again, looking, we have, repurposed global and plastic credits, one tree planted on tree planting, the waste management in the case of this one event, the waste company, Bonneville Environmental Foundation, South Pole on carbon offsets. I mean, it just goes on and on. We just those are all partnerships, and each of those partnerships is a relationship that requires TLC and conviction and collaboration and good communications, just like any relationship does.
Right.
So those are that's where I think there's a lot of power in that, because it's look, events, as I said, are kind of small, and so we need to create a bandwagon. And if multiple events at the same venue start doing something, and then multiple venues in the same jurisdiction start to make it known that we need infrastructure,
right,
you create that bandwagon.
Right. Yeah. So as we kind of start moving towards wrapping up here, we kind of started this conversation around the idea of climate literacy, and obviously, I think we both believe that the climate crisis is like an existential one, and it's certainly a potentially existential threat to the event industry as a whole. So I'm just curious, what your final thoughts are in terms of, all of us just becoming more climate literate, how we become more climate literate. What are some of the big issues that we all should really be paying attention to from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of this is pretty intuitive. I mean, the climate crisis, which goes to energy use and waste. I mean, everything ultimately rolls up to climate. But the other is the biodiversity crisis. Fully half of global GDP, so trillions, tens of trillions of dollars. I think it's 40 or more trillions of dollars depend on nature. Obviously, food and textiles and so many other things. Forestry, wood products require healthy ecosystems, and we're in the process of losing a lot of those ecosystems and a lot of the keystone species in those ecosystems that are going to be disruptive to the foods we eat, to the protections that we get from the climate crisis around tidal mitigation or high tide mitigation, flood control, and erosion control and other things. we rely on nature for all those things. So those are, paying attention and understanding where you connect in whatever you do, whatever your part of the business ecosystem is or event ecosystem. Where do you connect with these things? And it's not always obvious. And sometimes it's one or two or three links away. So we're just trying to understand all of that. But I guess, there are a lot of people in the event space who are thinking about this, and a lot of them are doing it right. And one of the things that I've found, we run some peer networks of sustainability professionals from mostly big companies. And one of the things that's just amazing and that I love about this field is that there's this very high level of generosity to share pre-competitively, and which most of this stuff is, how do we do stuff? Come on over, I'll show you how we did it. I'll send you the slide deck that we use to get management buy-in. I'll share the vendor contract language we use. I'll even name the vendors that we use. There's a lot of people who want to share. And I think there's a number of organizations already looking at how do you green events.
Right.
And being a part of that and understanding that, you have to start somewhere, and what's the low-hanging fruit that you can get into. So I think that's what's really exciting, is that most of these things are doable and often cost effective as well. Just figuring it all out, that's the tough part. And the good news is that others have already figured it out for us.
Yeah, and that's a great place to end. Joel, thank you so much for your insights today. It's been a great conversation, and good luck with the Verge conference next week. We'll be looking to see, the results from that. So let me just wrap up by, again, thanking all of our sponsors. Jody, if you could bring up any slides that you have. So again, thank you to our Patio Perspective sponsor, Academy of Sciences. Thank you to our ongoing sponsors for 2023, the Clancy, Harbor Court, Beacon Grand, the Zuma Restaurant, Fairmont, Hotel One, and the Tonga Room. And we are going to be actually going to the Verge conference next week. We have a VIP tour of the backstage sustainability practices at the GreenBiz Verge tour next Tuesday at 3:30 p.m. Please register for that. It's a limited registration. We can accommodate 25 people. So please join us for that. Check LinkedIn for topics, guest speaker announcements, and links. Our next Patio Perspective in November, I have an interesting guest, Lindsay Errol from Honeycomb Strategies, and we're going to be talking about this idea of choosing and rewarding responsible and sustainable venues. So we're going to do a little giveaway right now from our gift bag for the California Academy of Sciences. Let's see who our winner for today is. Owen Rundle. Congratulations, Owen. Okay, great. So again, thank you all for joining us for Patio Perspectives. Thank you again, Joel, for joining us today. It's been an honor to talk to you. Have a great day, everybody, and we will see you all next month. Take care.